Let's move into a meditation. I invite you to close your eyes. And you may even wish to place your hand on your heart. Because as we prepare for the channel from Kryon, I would like us to send our deep appreciation and gratitude to the ancestors of this ancient land of Australia. Think of all the ancestors that have walked across the dirt of the earth that makes up the continent of Australia. Who are they? What do they have to give us now? What is their knowledge and wisdom that they have handed on for generation after generation? Their knowledge and memories are held within the energetic grids of the earth. And so let us send a wave of appreciation and gratitude for all of the knowledge and wisdom and the experiences that the ancients, that the ancestors have gone through before us as we stand on the cusp of change. And allow yourself to receive the reciprocal wave of appreciation and gratitude that you are now acknowledging them, of recognizing them and saying, hello, we know you, we thank you, we honour you for all you have done. And together, let us take our hand in your hand and move towards this time of ascension in partnership. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to place your hand back in your lap as we receive the final message from Kryon for the day.
Greetings, dear ones. I am Kryon of Magnetic Service. This is channel 2 of 4, given specifically for Australia. And we are speaking of remarkable current things. And now we wish to talk about your experience right now with COVID. I don't want to speak necessarily about the virus, except to say things that I have said before. There are revelations in the next 2 years about truly what happened, how and why. That will be something for you to reveal. But we have also told you things are not always as they seem, and there will be anger because of what you discover. However, I want to talk to you about how remarkable it is of what's taking place. Now, you might say, right now in this country, Kryon, there's nothing remarkable about this. Indeed, that is for now. Indeed, that is how you may feel as you sit there, because of perhaps where you cannot go, or that you might be sequestered, or on and on, the things that you have been going through now for months. I know that. That's not what I'm speaking of. I want to talk about an overview that perhaps you haven't even thought of. Is it possible that this particular event, which you call COVID, this lockdown, this almost a year in this condition, is it possible that it's right on schedule? Dear ones, I want you to think for a moment logically with me. For decades now, tens of thousands of people a day have been traveling between all of the countries on the planet. They've been in the deepest, darkest jungles of almost all of the countries that have jungles. They come back and they get on airplanes and they go home. And they come and they go. And they come and they go. If you started counting the number of human beings who go before this scenario and go then between the countries, even on a daily basis, you'd be astonished. Perhaps the numbers will be even greater than you thought. Or the number of aircraft that are in the air at any one time during a day or a night count perhaps in the thousands, with their payload of human beings coming and going from all of the civilized and uncivilized countries. They go to places that people have never gone. They go into jungles that the people have never seen, and they come and they go. Years and years and years. What are the odds that you didn't have a pandemic during these times? The odds are astronomical, dear ones, because there were the same conditions there are today. The virus, the basis of, came from the jungles, comes from animals. But in addition, the study of the viruses have always been in the various labs. That didn't change. Neither did the fact that the virus was there. Neither did the fact that there were those around the virus. This is not all that new. And yet it occurred. Don't you find it interesting that it could have occurred so many times with so many other viruses and never did? Are there other viruses like this out there that derive themselves from animals perhaps, or in labs perhaps? The answer is, oh yes. And yet this was the year 2020 when all of it occurred. What could the possible reason be, you would say metaphysically, why you would have something so potent that it would shut down the planet for almost a year? Now I want you to think of this with me. The prophecies of the past, and that which sociologists would talk about, that would forever change societies, is war. War does that, for it flattens everything and stops economies and kills many. And in picking up the pieces after the tragedy of a world war, certain kinds of things occur and ideas are manifest that never were able to be manifest or implemented unless there had been a war. I would like to take you back for a moment to the end of World War II. Some of you have relatives, some of you have friends who actually speak of this, and they may have been there. I'll take you to a shattered Europe. And in the rubble, literally looking at the rubble of Europe, they started having meetings. And they had some ideas that the World War had brought them to that could never have been positioned or manifested or suggested without the war. And they looked around and they said, what if we could start trading together right now, while there are truly no borders except the ones we know about, but that everyone has crossed in order to escape, and the refugees, and this would be a good time to start looking at some kind of free trade between the former enemies of Earth. And they looked at who they were speaking of, and they saw all of the countries in Europe that had been the bastions at some time or another of war. Whether it was England or France or Italy, whether it was Germany, all of those had played a part, a major part, in conquering Spain. Think of this. All of them had been enemies of each other for so long. And the inkling, the idea, what if, right now, they're in shambles, nothing is working, we're going to put them together in trade. The idea was ludicrous because the economies of each country are vastly different. How could this work? Some will say it still hasn't. And that's simply because it has not been worked on with a high level of thinking yet, because that became the EU. In addition to that, somewhere along the line, they say, what if we all had the same currency? How would you like that in your country? If we decided somehow, we being that which is a society on earth, that everyone would have the same currency, I think you would fight that. And yet the impossible happened. And many do. It's not perfect. And today there's inequalities. Things are not working, some things are. But what is working the most is they are not at war. That did not reoccur, if you've noticed. Any citizen of the EU can live in any country legally. They walk through the borders now that used to have guard houses and customs officials and money changers. All gone because of one idea that took place at the end of the war, while everything was quiet and nothing could be reestablished at that moment that was normal. Are you starting to get an idea of where I'm going with this? These are the times, and these are the only times where the world can make decisions that stick because of what has happened that may have stopped everything for months. That is what is happening at this moment. Let me give you some things to think about. There are businesses, there are many things. There are societies. There are processes that should have been stopped a long time ago, but they couldn't be. They could not be because they were intertwined with other things that were appropriate. There were very dark things that were always in operation that could never be stopped because they were in alliance with things that were appropriate. Difficult to describe, but I think you understand what I mean. When things are all intertangled with one another in certain ways, it's difficult to then point out something and say, you have to stop that, because then it would affect everything around it. There were systems in place that you use even today. There were governmental systems, there were banking systems, there were all manner of things that all came to a halt some months ago. And when I mean a halt, I mean you couldn't go out. You couldn't go back to work. You couldn't do anything that you did before. And suddenly everything started to be quiet. I would like to tell you something for you to think about. Dear ones, you had the equivalent of a war without a war. For those of you who understand what I'm saying at this time, you might take a breath. Because as difficult as this time might have been for some of you, I am telling you this, the world has stopped for a reason. And there are things that fell apart that cannot be reestablished in their darkness because of this. There are things that should have not been continued that are now stopped. There are new ideas because of it, just like at the end of World War II. There are those now saying, we can do things now because we stopped, because this and that is appropriate, and we can put them together where we never could put them together before. We can rethink who we trade with. We can rethink the entities that we thought we had to do this with or we had to do that with. We can totally rethink everything because we're starting again. And the interesting thing about this is the infrastructure of everything you have has remained. There was no war to destroy it. Are you seeing what I'm saying? When it's time to go back to work, the infrastructure of that remains. When it's time to rebuild, when it's time to get back to that which you believe to be normal, and you can, and it's allowed, and it's safe, everything has been waiting for you. It's going to reemerge a lot faster than you think. There are those who say once you stop this kind of economy, that you cannot restart it quickly and it'll take as long to restart it as to stop it. Stand by and check this out when it happens. Watch your financial markets rebound in the hopes. Watch what happens to those who thought they would not be able to get jobs at a certain place, finding new industries that only could have started. Watch what happens to that which is the utilities when they realize this is the time when they can implement certain plans they never could before because they had stopped this and that. You understand what I'm saying. Remarkable that you could have come to this place in order to enable new ideas, new things on this planet that never would have happened if you simply had continued and continued and continued and continued. There are many who got to know their children. Too busy, many of you. It's an interesting day when so many have to go to work, and the children then, they don't necessarily have the kind of upbringing that you had or that you would like. Especially in those big cities where so many have to work in order to make ends meet. And suddenly the parents are home with their children. Suddenly there's homeschooling. Suddenly you have to look into their eyes and teach them things that only their teachers were teaching them. Suddenly you learned who they were. Interesting things regarding relationships with families. Some fell in love all over again because of this time when they had to make things work together, and it was difficult. And they realized the reason that they were together. Some, again, had the opposite reaction when they also realized they should not have stayed together, and this was the catalyst to make both of their lives better by separating. There were so many things that took place in the stoppage, in the time to rekindle an idea that you could not have necessarily implemented as long as they were busy, as long as you were coming and going, as long as it was this and that and this and that, and suddenly everything stops. Books have been written during this time that never would have been written. Ideas germinating. Time to think. Time to love. Time to reconsider. And I'm not just talking about Australia. Indeed, this is worldwide and will affect relationships between countries even. This is what COVID will have given you, and historians and sociologists will start to track it and start to tell you what occurred that never would have occurred before. When I get to the next channel, I'll start telling you what you're going to see and what you have seen that you may not think about, that shows proof of an increased consciousness, awareness of human to human and society to society, getting rid of things that should have gotten rid of a long time ago. It's difficult where you sit, and there are those who say, when will this ever be over? We're tired of it. We're tired of it, indeed. But the bigger picture, dear ones, with all that has transpired, is almost like coming out of the war, except that you don't have the incredible horror of war. And the infrastructure is still there. Amazing that something like a pandemic might actually bring this planet closer together, that actually might bring ideas together, because you stop and you think about it and you work together. This is what I wanted to tell you that is remarkable for your time. The most remarkable thing are the odds that it never happened before. There have been worse flus, dear ones, that even killed more people, dear ones, and you did not shut down the earth for them. Something was different here. Not a conspiracy, dear ones, a happening, as you might think, that brings this planet to a place it would never have been before, and the outcome will be beneficial. Benevolence. Things you never thought would come from this are happening under the bonnet right now. You'll find out later some good things are taking place. The beauty of all of this is that this is the beginning of a new cycle. And this new cycle is able to be regenerated and started and implemented without a world war. But it took this to stop it, to stop you, to stop everything. And you just stay inside for a little while. Dear ones, these things will pass and there will be surprises. And the biggest surprises will be that the secrets come out, that you do something about it, and it does not go back to the way it was. You will not allow that. Humanity is starting to shift in what it will allow and what it will not. The integrity factor of humanism itself is starting to raise. You'll see. This is why we are in love with you. You go through these things at this time that we told you some time ago would occur, that there would be mass changes that would be unexpected, that you would get through them without a war. And here you are, participating in this very thing. Remarkable. Current. You're in a special time. Your children will read about it, and their children will read about it. And just as we saw what happened after World War II, they will talk about what took place because of COVID that changed the planet in a good way forever. I'll be back. And so it is.